talk today, I was like, why me? And why should I say yes? We all get these invitations. And then I always reflect. I never say yes at the same time. And then I turned to South Africa's national anthem, our national anthem. And it says, and united we shall stand. Yeah. So, I do lots of things in media, but I also do a branding show, and brand works for me. When people make a brand connection, then I talk. The other thing is your payoff line. Build strong communities together. That resonates with me so much so that a few months ago on my talk show on SFM radio, I insisted that we create a feature for half an hour every Friday called the NGO Report. And this is the bottom line. We said, NGOs are the bedrock of society. Communities are the bedrock of society. They play a massive, massive role in delivering the national agenda. On the one hand, filtering down, but on the other hand, they play a massive role in galvanizing from the bottom up. So NGOs, stroke communities, cannot be ignored, must not be ignored, should not be ignored. In fact, they need to be amplified. So what we do, we use that 30-minute slot on a Friday to blatantly, unashamedly promote NGOs and communities. So therefore, when your payoff line talks about build strong communities together, that's another reason for me to say, yes, I need to be here. So I think Cosella said earlier on, I have a dream. I think two of you said so. But I also have a dream. Good for you. Yeah. But listen to this dream. I have a dream, that South Africa will not win the Cricket World Cup. Sounds terrible. I also have a dream that, and it's been a dream that's come true so far, that South Africa will not win the Soccer World Cup. I also have this dream that says that South Africa will not win another Rugby World Cup. Again, they've won it twice. And yet I'm saying I have a dream. But it's not a nightmare, I can tell you now. Because this is my dream. I have a dream that South Africa will one day not win the Soccer World Cup, Cricket World Cup, Rugby World Cup, and every other World Cup, because those are lesser World Cups. The World Cup we actually have to win, the biggest World Cup of the lot, is a World Cup that hasn't been named as yet. So I'm going to call it the World Cup of Nations. The World Cup that says this country is the #1 country in the world. And I'm saying this as a person who loves sport. So all the things I mentioned, I love it. Okay? But if God told me, let me make a deal with you. Soccer World Cup, Cricket World Cup, Rugby World Cup, other World Cups, or World Cup of Nations. #1 status on earth for your entire country. Which one do you want? So that's the dream that I want. I want South Africa to be the #1 champion nation on the planet Earth. And my dream has the Secretary General of the United Nations standing up and awarding this trophy. It won't happen in one day. This trophy to the President of South Africa at that time, and telling him or her that take this trophy, because this trophy is delivered now to the best nation on planet Earth. And that's my vision, and that's my dream, and that's why I am here to talk about that. It is a vision that is greater than any other tournament that this country has entered. And key to that mission is what I do, which is, #1, identify champions in South Africa. #2, use them to inspire other champions. #3, multiply the numbers of champions that we have in our country. And fourthly, when we get to that critical mass of not one champion, and Nelson Mandela was quoted a few times with great respect, but as we all know, one champion does not make a country. Not even 5, not even 10, not even 100. We need, United Way spoke about helping and impacting on 1 million people. Here's another way to impact. How do we turn 1 million people from not doing anything into becoming champions? Champions in their field, champions that are able to compete with the very best, not in Johannesburg or Soweto or Atteridgeville or Khayelitsha or Cape Town or Bloemfontein, or not even in Cairo or somewhere in Timbuktu or in Lagos. No, to compete with the very, very best in the world. And therefore, the core mantra of what we do as Champion South Africa is this: champion people build champion people. You cannot be a champion to build, you cannot not be a champion to build another champion. Champion people build champion people. And then, champion people build champion nations. There is no country in the world, forget the resources. There are countries with enormous resources in the world that is able to turn their countries around on resources alone. It has been on the direct intervention of individuals in those countries that have moved up. And I think of 2 countries immediately that comes to mind fairly recently. One is Singapore, part of the Greater Malaya at that stage, the smallest of that Malayan archipelago at the time, with minimal resources, that is now one of the wealthiest countries in the world. How did that happen? How did it happen that South Korea, part of Korea, was able to inspire to the level that just about every fancy gadget that says made in the USA is actually being spoken about as saying, actually it's made in Korea. How did that happen? Because individuals decided that we are not going to be mid-table. We're not going to be 1 point above the relegation zone. Goodness gracious, we want to win the league championship. We want to be the number 1 at what we do. So, in wartime, your national service is going to the army. We know that, right? Now, thank goodness South Africa, we have attrition. We don't have war. So we have peacetime. So in peacetime, which is where we are now, what is your national service? Does it mean you just chill out? If we have 1,000 years of peace, we don't fight for our country any longer. And that's the trouble. We think we're in this wonderful peace, so we have to do nothing. So in wartime, you go to battle. But don't get mixed up with whether it's a gun or a grenade. That's just that's the tool. You're going there to defend your country. You're going there to raise the flag of your country. So we have 1,000 years of peace now, and we're not going to do that because we don't need to have national service. And I'm asking you, therefore, what is your national service? And for me, and where I come from, a champion South Africa, national service has got to be to align everything you do right now. It must be aligned to what is best for your country. So I want to see a young girl with 6 A's in matric, and I want to hear her say, I'm so thankful to my family and I'm thankful to my school, which they will say, but I also want them to say, I'm doing it for my country. Because my country needs me to get the 6 A's. Not the school headmistress or my parents, and they all need them. But my country needs me to get the 6 A's. Why do we gloat when sports people perform well on their stages, and we don't make the connection outside of sport that actually each one of us right now, even now, we are performing. Or we should be performing. If we're not performing today, we should be performing. And why don't we make the same connection that every effort of a sports personality is geared to representing their country, but every effort of an individual who's not in sport is not geared to representing their country. So, national service for me is to align everything you do to be the number 1 that you can be, to be geared to becoming a champion, to be geared to finding other champions, champion people, build champion people, remember that? And then to create a mentorship platform where that commitment that you do is, for me, called national service. Because that's what you want, to raise the productivity levels of every single individual in our country. So that's what I'm saying. My question to you, therefore, is like, quite bluntly, who's with me on that journey? Anybody here? You guys can pop out, eh? You have the right to say no. But then you're not with me on this thing because I want to win that World Cup of Nations. And I cannot do it on my own. And neither can you, for that matter. So that brings me on to United Way, South Africa, or United Way, SA. The truth is, people like myself, we can have this great desire to become the #1 nation on earth. But to be this winning nation, to be this champion in South Africa. But if there is no investment in infrastructure, then my talking on this podium has a limited appeal. It has a limited impact. It needs more. And I'm not here, by the way, to build infrastructure. That depends on other people. My job really is to inspire and to collaborate and to connect the dots with those that do that well. And it's very clear, based upon what I've seen, that that's where organizations like United Way SA will come in. From what has been heard already by the president and the local chairperson, it's clear there's a massive investment in the single biggest asset this country needs, which is an investment in human capital. Ultimately, when we talk schools, we're actually talking about the individual. When we're talking about health, it's not about the hospital. It's an investment in the ability of the individual to produce, and so on, and so on. When we talk income, it's not about making that person just rich. It's about that ability of that person to generate wealth so that that person can invest in greater wealth and maybe even put some money to United Way sometime so that will revolve. And therefore, my vision is that for my country, we need United Way SA to succeed. Because we're not in competition. I'm involved in the media business. I'm involved with my own movement, Champion South Africa. But we have to be in collaboration with each other. That symbolism that we spoke about earlier about the hand, we have to hold hands on this. Because we're not going to do it again, alone. And therefore, we need all our sectors of society to be aligned. We cannot have a disconnection. I just love using sporting analogies because for some reason, it's the simplest way to understand it. Can you just imagine yourself in the cricket team's playing right now, so let's use them as an example. Imagine yourself with the South African cricket team, and you've been picked as the fast bowler, and you decide you don't want to bowl, or you're not going to bowl, or you've been picked as the wicket keeper, and you choose not to perform at that level. What's going to happen to that team? It will disconnect, it will fail, it will lose. So like that, every one of you, like that sporting team, you have a game. You are in the game and you have to play your own game. Nobody's saying if you're the wicket keeper or you're the fly-half in rugby or the striker in soccer, you must change your positions. Play your positions, but play it well. And let us ensure that we don't have 5 strikers when we actually need 1 striker and maybe 4 defenders. Let's understand where we need to be able to connect. So I like what United Way SA is doing. I like the fact that there's a very definite emphasis and with regard to interventions, with regard to education, income generation, and health. And we all know that there are many movements in the world that have come to the fore in the last few years. Occupy Wall Street, in the USA, fees must fall, not in my name, just about everywhere else, Black Lives Matter, and I can go on. And they all are very, very important, every one of them. But here's the challenge to every one of us who are part of those movements. We need to take the energy we put to those movements and redirect them and redirect our energies to build. It's okay to protest. It's very important to protest. South Africa's change happened. We're in Youth Month today. June the 1st. June 16th is the beginning of a very important, a significant day in the life of this country. But at some stage, the youth don't just protest, they must build. And so we are here at a position where we have a challenge, which is to build. And therefore, that investment that you make, United Way, South Africa, into community development, I must tell you, resonates with me 100%. Not 5%, 100%. And that commitment about linking NGOs, business, government, and individual participation, the point made earlier about how much money gets collected from just individuals. Well, I'll tell you what, in South Africa, individuals will give you nothing if they're not going to get richer. So there's a way that we have to ensure that they get much richer. So I like that public-private participation is critical because it becomes lasting. It has a lasting impact on individuals and societies. So I urge you therefore to, well, many of you are part of it. Those of you who are not, looking at investing in what United Way does and will do. Because in effect, it is an investment in your future and the future of your children and certainly the future of your grandchildren. I'm going to end up with a quote from the former Vice Chancellor at the University of Western Cape. That's Professor Brian O'Connell, who said to me 3-4 years ago something that for me was profound, and it has never left me. He said, Ashraf, 87% of South Africa is black. And listen to this. What happens to the 87% impacts on what happens to the 100%. 87% of South Africa is black. What happens to the 87% will impact on what happens to the 100%. You cannot separate it. So, take that home, it's profound. But I will now borrow from that and ask you a few more questions. Can I then say, and we don't have to be very literal about what is rich and poor, can I say 80% of South Africa is also poor? 80% of South Africa also battles with basic health. Can I also say that 87% of South Africa battles with basic education? That's why so many people, for them, that social grant SASSA deadline was the single most important day in the year, April 1, and not something like June 11th, 2010, which was the beginning of the Soccer World Cup all those years ago. For many people, April 1 this year was more important than any Soccer World Cup we've ever had. So dare we say that 80% of South Africa has lost hope, that the next 20 years will be less valuable than the previous 20 years. I'm not saying that, and I don't want to hear that. I'm saying we need to avoid someone saying that. And we can only avoid that when it's organizations like mine or ours as Champion South Africa and organizations like United Way South Africa that works together to ensure that we don't just give hope, we provide hope. We provide that rope for people to hold on to. That rope that will ensure that that 87% becomes the 100%. And all that I've said, you can change that narrative and say delete, delete, delete. 87% is not poor any longer. 87% is not uneducated. 87% do not battle with basic health care. And scratch that all out and change that into what is required of a champion nation. So, as I wrap up, many of us have traveled, and we know this. When you go anywhere in the world, and you say you're from South Africa, they will say, Mandela. And it's great. I'm a big fan of Nelson Mandela and the Mandela Foundation and what Silo Hatang and the company does right now. But here's the thought, even borrowing from what Mandela himself has said. In 20 years' time, if you go anywhere in the world and you say you're from South Africa, and they say, Mandela, we would have failed miserably. Because it would have meant we are not creating new champions. It would have meant we are living in a glorious era that happened. And we're dwelling on that, and our emphasis is on that. Whereas Mandela himself is saying, I'm not a prophet. It's one of the first things he ever said at the parade in Cape Town when he was released from prison. I'm not a prophet. I'm a servant of the people, essentially. So why then do we want to emphasize that, but not say we have a responsibility to ensure that when we say, South Africa, they're going to throw up 20, 30, 40, 50 different names. And that's only going to come with the type of investment that people like you have, because you guys are in a position of influence as opposed to position people on the outside. And think about this. The Victoria Age, the great Victorian Age of Britain. It came and it went. There was the Malian Empire, which was in Timbuktu, one of the great empires in Africa, in the world. It happened, thrived, and it dipped. The Egyptian reign of the pharaohs, the same thing happened. Hitler's Germany, and I'm not pronouncing morality, I'm saying at that stage it was an empire. What happened to it? The Islamic Empire of Andalusia in Spain, 700 years. What happened to it? The Roman Empire, the Persian Empire, the Greek Empire, the Ottoman Empire, I can go on. They all ended. And as we know, the sun did set on the British Empire. Never mind what they said at that time. What am I saying in conclusion? Our country, we have no divine right to be the best. We're going to have to work our backsides off. Because all these nations I've mentioned, they grew up to become the champion nations of their time. And then someone decided, let's be opulent. Let's not worry about the people. Let's not make an impact on the 100%. We are the 13%, wherever they were at that time. And then what happened? The 13% also loses out to the point where the 100% loses out. So we have no divine right to be the best. We have a responsibility, if we want to win that World Cup of Nations that I speak about, for myself and yourself and all the investment that we speak about, to make sure it happens and happens in a very positive and strong way. I know that Harvard, for example, is investing in African leadership as per yesterday. In South Africa, they've opened up an office in Johannesburg. Same reason. The African century is now. But for the African century to work, the South African century has to also happen. It has to be then divided into the 50-odd states that make up Africa, instead of just speaking broadly, we're going to be the best. Like how? You have to bring it down to what are we going to do about it. So I'll wrap up by saying this here. We've been asked to put our hands together once or twice. I'm going to ask you again. Number one, stand. I'd like it when you guys stand. Can you please stand? All of you, please stand. And don't just do it now. You can either stand and say, okay, thank you, Ashraf, bye. No. What I want you to do, when I tell you to do it, is for a full 1 minute, not 10 seconds, not 20 seconds, for a full 1 minute, you're going to applaud. You're going to applaud yourself. You're going to ring up that sound. You're going to make the type of noises that Griselda initially spoken about this African welcome. But very important, you're going to feel the energy when you do that. And be aware of that symbol of United Way, that hand at the bottom, because your hands are going to touch when you clap. Because that's what you're going to take away from here when we're done and dusted. None of us came for coffee. Coffee's fine. But if we just came for the coffee, we got it all wrong. That's not a tea party. Even the Boston Tea Party didn't quite work out. So we need to understand that very, very well. Okay. So can we do that for 1 minute, right? Can we go? Right, let's go. 1 minute, all the way. You can have a seat. Here's the point. 1 minute of putting your hands together and energizing yourself will and can make a massive, massive impact. And we've seen from the example of United Way Global what happened when 1 or 2 people in Denver started something up and what has happened. So don't underestimate that. I'll leave you with this. All the things I've said, the competition for this champion nation status that I speak about, it hasn't even started. It hasn't even been named. We don't even have a name for that competition. But I want it, right? And I'll leave you with this. Like any good student, you don't wait for the exam timetable to come out. You start preparing right now. That's what I'm asking you to do. Thank you.